Once upon a time, two friends joined forces to bring you the best in horror entertainment. Brian from the north, Tim from the south, each bringing their own unique perspective to the horror community. Movie reviews, Blu-ray releases, beer pairings, games, and more. Welcome to your new home for horror. This is Civil Gore.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to episode 194 of the Civil Gore podcast. I am your host, Tim.
And this is Brian, and we are on week 3 already of our Summer Slaycation. And Tim, we are going to a franchise that's probably one of, that features one of probably the most popular, definitely one of the most popular horror movies of all time. Wouldn't you think?
I would think so, considering I watched an entire documentary about fans of this franchise.
Of course, we were talking about The Evil Dead. And, since we're breaking it up, we're going to do, the first thing we're going to do is Evil Dead the Musical. No, just kidding. But that is a great piece of art if you have not seen that. You could usually catch it. They actually have versions of it on YouTube you can watch. But I was lucky, Seth and I saw that in person. It was kind of fun. They actually have the splash zone, which is the first few rows of seats where you they'll tell you may get splashed with fake blood. Mm-hmm. I think they put like a little they give you kind of like ponchos or something. But really great soundtrack, really funny. But yeah, no, of course we're gonna do the first one is gonna be The Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2. Next week we will do Army of Darkness and the remake of Evil Dead. So we're going to split that up. We're trying to do two, little smaller franchises because, of course, we have the 4-week Puppet Master extravaganza coming up.
Yeah, that one's going to be crazy. Let's get right into it. This is our Summer Slaycation.
Summer Slaycation.
All right, Brian. So I wanted to preface this one this week because I am not and have never claimed to be an expert on the Evil Dead. And I say that only because I find it much more difficult to talk about classic horror movies that everybody loves. Ironically, I find this harder to talk about than maybe these newer movies that have come out that nobody's seen yet, or these more niche movies, just because movies like Evil Dead have been talked about and written about so many times. There's so many documentaries out there. It's kind of like, what am I going to bring to this? What can I possibly say about the Evil Dead that has not already been said? So when, I preface that to say, in this episode, don't expect any startling revelations from Tim about the Evil Dead series, because I'm sure you guys already know everything there is to know about it. And I'm definitely not an expert. I love the franchise, love the series. I've seen the movies many, many times. But at the same time, Brian, I kind of differ from you in that I don't watch a lot of movies over and over and over and over again. I've always been the type that I'm always, if given the preference between watching a movie I've already seen or watching something new, I'll almost always watch something new. So I don't tend to watch a lot of movies a lot of times in short succession. Doesn't mean I haven't seen plenty of movies multiple times, but usually that's over a period of years. So, I've probably seen Evil Dead 2, I don't know, maybe 10 times, 20 times, I don't know. But it's been over 30 years. It's not been over it's like I watch it 10 times a year or anything. So I can't say that I'm like this expert on everything Evil Dead, because I tend to watch my movies, even the ones I'm a big fan of, only sporadically. And in this case, I had not seen the original Evil Dead in quite some time, because Evil Dead 2 is usually my go-to if I have to choose. And Evil Dead 2 I had actually not seen in several years. Actually, if to be quite honest, the movie I've seen out of the series the most is probably Army of Darkness, because that one, and I'll talk about it in the next episode, was a big favorite in college. That one hit 92, which is right before I graduated high school. And that one just became like a cult favorite in college for some reason. So that's the one I've probably seen the most times.
Yeah, I think Evil Dead 2, though, also was on cable a ton.
It was.
That was a big cable heavy. I mean, the original one was on it as well, but the Evil Dead 2 used to be on constantly.
Yeah, and I think most people. What's funny is when we start talking about these, I actually saw Evil Dead 2 before Evil Dead, because it was a much more. By the time I really got into horror, when these came out, when Evil Dead 2 came out in '87, that was the much more popular one. It's actually one of those that's actually a. You don't get to see it mentioned much as a sequel that's superior to the original. But I think it's a great example of a sequel that's better than the original, and it's always been the more popular one.
Well, and it's so drastically different from the original,
Yeah.
I think, too, which kind of makes it stand out. Which is, the tone is completely different. Like, yeah, there's some, you'd laugh at some of the lines in the first one due to its like cheesiness, but like the second one, they're like, no, we're gonna make this batshit off the wall crazy kind of like zany comedy in there, and it's like yeah, it's horror and gore in it, but it's definitely like a horror comedy done perfectly, but like heavy on the comedy, I think.
Yeah, well, we'll have to talk about it more when we get to it, but I think by the time I saw it, like the whole Ash thing, and I probably had not even seen it until Army of Darkness came out, to be honest. So when I went back to watch it, I of course watched Evil Dead 2, and it wasn't until later that I went back and watched Evil Dead, so I kind of watched them out of order. And we'll get into that because that gets really confusing.
Yeah, because Army of Darkness basically could stand on its own at some level, because they do the perfect recap in the beginning anyway.
Yeah.
So and I remember a lot of people were fans of Army of Darkness, had no clue that there were
that was me
prior to
that was me that was exactly me, because I saw Army of Darkness and had no clue about the other two films, and then I went back and watched Evil Dead 2, and then like well after Evil Dead 2 I ended up going back and watching Evil Dead, which is kind of a weird backwards way to do it. But let's get right into it. Let's get into the nitty-gritty details. So the Evil Dead 1981, directed of course by the genius of Sam Raimi, starring Bruce Campbell as Ash, Ellen Sandweiss as Cheryl, Richard DeManencourt as Scott, Betsy Baker as Linda, and Teresa Tilly as Shelley. 5 friends travel to a cabin in the woods where they unknowingly release flesh-possessing demons. And Brian, when I was rewatching this one, it's funny because, like, just what you said about the tone difference, I was struck by how straight this movie is played. This is a straight-up horror movie. You don't yet get to see any of the comedy of Ash. There's hardly any dialogue, really. I mean, there's a little bit of dialogue between the friends in the beginning, but there's not a whole lot of dialogue when people start turning deadite and it's just Ash alone. And I was really struck by how straight a horror movie this was, because we're so used to the Ash character from years of Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness and Ash vs. Evil Dead and all the pop culture. I mean, we're just used to the later era Ash. And to see him in this movie where he's really just scared most of the movie. He's not this buff hero. He's not this wisecracking.
Yeah, there's no groovy.
There's none of that in this. He's just like this scared kid that he's kind of like the final guy instead of the final girl, but he's barely making it in that respect. He spends most of the movie terrified, and I was really just struck by
or getting thrown against the wall,
or getting completely beat up. My God, I mean, the stuff he went through for this movie. Well, I think what all the cast went through for this movie.
Yeah. If you read some of the trivia, they were not happy through this. They were.
Yeah. But I was just struck by what a straight up great horror movie this was. And very, very light on the comedy. Like you said, most of the comedy I think arises from our knowledge of Bruce Campbell more than actual intentional comedy. I think I was laughing throughout it just because I always find Bruce Campbell funny, because I know what his character becomes later on. So just some of his facial expressions were cracking me up. Even though I don't think they were necessarily intentionally meant to be funny during the movie.
No, this was like you laughed at like either a cheesiness line or stuff you normally laugh at in a horror movie, or Bruce Campbell.
Yeah.
And not because he was being funny, because he's just Bruce Campbell. It was like, I always think back to that Seinfeld thing where, like, remember when they decided Jerry can't help being funny?
Yeah.
Kind of, it was like that. Like, Bruce Campbell kind of can't help being funny.
Yeah.
Because, his signature, like, breakout role where he made Ash what he was in the second one. And that, you're right, that's what people remember. So if someone had never seen the first one but know, like, Ash like what he's like now. Like, can you imagine? Like, well, you kind of got it, I guess, because you saw like 3 for, but like imagine like even now people watching like Ash and the Evil Dead and then now go back to those movies even like they're probably like, oh my god, like imagine they go from like Ash to the Evil Dead and then go to the original Evil Dead. They're probably like, what the?
Yeah, like,
this is the same thing.
Yeah, like why is he not saying wisecracks? Like why is he not doing this stuff? Yeah, it's kind of funny, but I mean you can still see that Bruce Campbell was definitely the most. We talked about the last episode. How some actors you just kind of can tell they've got that leading man persona, and he kind of just had all the charm and everything when you see him in the movie. I will have to say I was really struck on the rewatch by how genius some of the, like, for this to be a low budget film, indie film, I mean, this is kind of like a master class in how you do really cool things on a budget. I mean, some of the stuff they did in here that to me would be like, if you told me in the screenplay, like, you have to make this tree attack this woman and I've got this kind of budget, I'd be like, there's no way I can do it. There's no way this is going to be possible. You need to make a mirror into another dimension. There's no way we can do this. Like, there's no way we can do any of this. And yet somehow they pulled it off, and they did it with really simple effects. I mean, when you watch it, you know exactly how they did it, and it doesn't take away at all from the effect. Like, there's a sequence I'm thinking of when Ash like puts his hand into the mirror. And you can tell it's just a pool of water, but it's done so well, like it's filmed so well that it's still like surprised me. I don't know how else to explain it. And I kept seeing moments of that throughout the movie. Like they would use like a cool angle, like when they couldn't show something because it would just be too expensive to actually pull it off. Like like stabbing a deadite in the head or something. They would just do like a quick reverse shot, so you're stabbing it from the other side, or they would do it in silhouette. I mean, they did all these really cool camera angles and camera tricks to give you the perception of what was happening without actually showing you what was happening. It was pure genius. I mean, if you go back and watch this with that kind of mindset, you start seeing like all the really cool stuff that Sam Raimi pulled off that just blew my mind.
Yeah, no, and it's like, this is a movie that I believe it was shot on 16 millimeter. They needed to blow it up to 35 to even get it into theaters. And there are some really some general sequences in this movie that are downright creepy, though. Like, I remember the one that used to always freak me out was where she was like, "We're gonna get you," like that.
Yeah.
For some reason, that just to freak me out for some reason. And it's like, there's not, like, we've gone over this. There's not many things that'll like really kind of give us a scare per se, but there's like more freak out things, and that was one that used to freak me out. But I think the thing about this one is, like, if you think about it, it's such a simple premise that has been duplicated how many times now?
Oh, I know. Yeah.
And yet, like, I still wonder if this gets the credit it deserves for how much it did, because, you see so many other, like, versions of things like this where there's, like, big budgets attached to it. And they went in with, like, next to, I mean, in today's standard, next to nothing, and produced just an amazing horror film.
Well, one thing that struck me too when I was watching is, if you look at movies around the same time period, 80, 81, they were mostly slashers, and plot-wise were very similar. But this one was like really kind of off the wall plot if you think about it. I mean, it wasn't like it's kind of a demon possession film, I guess, in a way, but it's not like The Exorcist by any means. It's you have multiple people being possessed by these demon things from this Book of the Dead, and there's this whole backstory. You get more of that in Evil Dead 2. They kind of flesh that out. You don't get as much of it in Evil Dead 1, but it's kind of a really kind of a unique plot point. Yeah, it would be copied, later on. There were other movies that kind of had this whole, multiple people getting possessed by demon type situations, but this one I was really struck by how unique that plot was for the time period. Really in general, if you go back and look at early 80s movies, I know the 80s have kind of been defined by the slashers of the big franchises like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. And those, and you kind of look at the decade as a whole as being representative of the decade. But in the really early 80s, you see this really diverse number of plots, and even the ones that were slashers, you saw like a great variety between them before the big franchises took off. You saw like really interesting mysteries and stuff, and who the killer was. I'm always fascinated by it. It's usually that 80-81 time period is when you see like these really diverse plots going all kinds of crazy. And then only when the big franchises took off did everything kind of start congealing into like this common denominator type movie. But yeah, I'm always a big fan of anything like 80-81. That's where the sweet spot for like we want some really unique stuff. And Evil Dead's a perfect example of something that just kind of broke out of the box and did something completely different.
Yeah, and if you notice, like the artistic shots in this are so most of the, like you said, a lot of them are slashers, but even the ones that weren't slashers and stuff, I doubt there'd be one that has such a like really cool shots as Evil Dead has, just from different viewpoints where he sticks the camera, and like what you're viewing, and it's like you don't, some of them you almost don't even notice how cool it is, where you're actually seeing, it's like there was one, I think it was just a simple shot in a car in the beginning where he had the camera, and I'm like, usually you don't have that shot from there, and it was I can't remember the exact specifics. I just remember thinking that so many times. I'm like, wow, look at that, where he decided to put the camera.
Oh, like the time I can't remember if this is in Evil Dead 1 or 2, but when he's facing up and Ash is shoveling dirt, like he's burying the body and he's shoveling the dirt onto the camera lens. It's such a simple thing.
I think that's the first one. Yeah.
It's just
well, actually now I don't know, because they do it
it's already, they blend together when you watch them back to back.
Yeah.
But yeah, just simple things like that just put you so much in the moment. And then, like, of course, the famous, ground level shots of, like, the evil moving through the forest and stuff. How many times was that copied?
Oh, yeah. And it was copied, but using, like, technology. Like, they did it by, like, literally on the board, like a board.
Right.
With the camera centered in it and then, like, running and stuff, and it's like, that's... Like, and it gives it such a cool, like, effect to it, because it gives it this, like, uneasy effect. Like, when you just do it, like, with a, like a real full, like, I forgot, what do you call that thing? Where the camera's on the track.
Like steady cam?
Like
not steady.
Yeah, the steady cam, but, like, there's a newer term that they use, because it's like almost on, like, a roller coaster track.
Oh, yeah,
like,
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I don't know what you call it.
Yeah, like, I mean, but there's something that's, like, not as, like, cool about that. Like, this is like, it's got like the little camera shakes and the bumps and the the imperfections that make it so great. It's like,
well, then there's also like there's so many cool things where he does where like he like slightly speeds up the film, or there the whole tree sequence. There's a lot of that's done in reverse, where he ran the film backwards and stuff. And then there's the shots where of course the stop motion stuff, which he gets into even more in Evil Dead 2. But I mean, even that's like pretty crazy for a low budget movie. There's like some really light stop motion type stuff in Evil Dead.
Well, yeah, because Dino De Laurentiis got involved in the second one, so yeah, there's a little bit more of a
budget there.
More of a budget to do that, yeah. But they, yeah, I mean, just overall, I mean, yeah, you're right. It's like we're not gonna say anything that most fans of Evil Dead don't know about the first one. It's just there's something like if you really want to see a horror film like that really doesn't have a good budget to work with, but makes so much out of not really having anything, and it's like, and it's become such a beloved movie, that so many people have in their top horror list, because if you just look at the whole plot of it, it's just a really good horror movie. And you figure with that kind of a budget, you shouldn't have gotten what you got out of it even, It's like they managed to find ways to do things that are just so creative. So you're right. I mean, I think your term you used was the master class in it, and it is like 100% true. Like that's like that you need to, like, that needs to be studied, like, for filmmakers now to see, like, okay, just because you have all this budget, maybe you don't want to use it for this, maybe use it for something else, and then do it this way.
yeah, it was crazy. I mean, and we'll talk about it shortly with Evil Dead 2. He just continues that in Evil Dead 2. I mean, he didn't really necessarily have to use a bigger budget for some of the stuff he did, because Evil Dead 2, he continues some of the same ingenious little camera tricks and perception tricks and stuff that he did in Evil Dead, which we'll talk about some of my favorite scenes in that one when we get to that one. But fantastic movie. Again, like I said, I watched this one after Evil Dead 2, and that's where we're going to get. We talk about Evil Dead 2, I want to talk about that beginning, because that's always a really crazy source of confusion, and it confused me for a long time before we had commentary tracks and stuff to explain all this, and trivia, IMDb trivia to explain why Evil Dead 2 is a sequel and not a remake. But
yeah, because I originally thought it was a remake back in the day.
Yeah, I did
and then
too.
You realize, that no, it technically is a sequel, but they didn't have the rights to like their own movie, and it's kind of funny.
Yeah, Evil Dead is definitely, like I said, surprising to me to go back and watch it and see how much of a straight horror movie it was, and not really a horror comedy. But it's just what makes it great, and what makes it still worthy of watching, even with Evil Dead 2, because and also would have to say, so for the very reasons we talked about, some of these great camera tricks and stuff that are done in Evil Dead on a lower budget that you don't get to see in Evil Dead 2 makes it definitely worth watching.
Yes, no, you were 100% correct.
I guess we should go through some of the trivia here for Evil Dead. I mean, there's a ton of trivia. I guess we could go through some of our favorites. Now, this movie was filmed in Tennessee. When we get to Evil Dead 2, that one gets a little closer to home for me, so I like to talk about that. But this one, we talked about the terrible crew conditions. So they had this cabin that they're filming this movie in is the same lodging for 13 crew members. So they're all sleeping in the same little cabin, and no plumbing. So they were going days without showering, freezing weather, burning furniture to stay warm. You hear all kinds of horror stories from the commentaries. I watched the this has been a ways back. I watched I listened to the commentaries for Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, and because I used to have the I don't even know if I still have them. I used to have the old Anchor Bay tins. Remember those?
Oh yeah. I have the Evil Dead 2 one.
Yeah, I had the I know I had Evil Dead 2. I'm not positive. I might have had, if they made one.
I have the Book of the Dead version of Evil Dead, like where it's like the rubbery.
Yes. I've got one. I've got two of those actually.
Oh yeah, I think I have two also, because they came out with one for each, right?
No, I just have a duplicate copy of one of them, but yeah.
Because I thought they came out with an Evil Dead 2 version of it also.
They may have. I've got the original.
I could just yeah.
But I ended up buying both of these. Actually, I ended up buying these both digitally for the podcast. So like, you know what? I just want to have them because I don't actually have them on Blu-ray. I've got both the versions I have are DVD. So I figured I'd buy them in high def on Blu-ray.
Yeah, no, I have them on Blu-ray, and they actually enhance it. They basically give you the widescreen enhancement on the Blu-ray of Evil Dead. So
yeah, that'd be my little piece of trivia there. The terrible crew conditions. I don't know if you had any in here, Brian, that you particularly liked.
Yeah, there was one. Let's see. Wait. Well, here's just one to show like the dedication of the core group for this movie. So it said, after completing the principal photography in the winter of 79-80, most of the actors left production. However, there was still much of the film to be completed. Most of the second half of the film features Bruce Campbell and various stand-ins, or fake shemps, as they like to call it, to replace the actors that left. So, like, that's how dedicated Bruce Campbell is. Like he literally stayed on, to just get all that kind of, like to make sure that film good. And I think he also helped raise the money to get it to blown up to 35 millimeter.
Yeah, I was talking about that. He helped. Basically, this movie wouldn't exist without Bruce Campbell pouring his own money into it, or at least his parents' money. I can't remember what it was, but but that, when you're talking about how most of the actors had already gone home, that's another genius of Sam Raimi's use of reverse shots and things, so that you don't even notice that they're stand-ins. I mean, the editing. Oh my god, the editing in this movie is so good when you see how he uses different camera angles and things to portray stuff on film that maybe wasn't necessarily filmed that way. It's pretty amazing.
Oh, well, no, this is kind of funny, actually. This is a little, not really there. But, so there's a scene where they open up the closet, and there's a t-shirt in there with the word Tamaqua on it. And that's where Sam Raimi went to camp, was Camp Tamaqua. Now, I don't know if you saw the movie, the comedy Indian Summer.
Ooh, long time ago.
Yeah, well, remember, Sam Raimi had a role in that, and that camp in there was Tamaqua.
Oh.
So there must be some kind of weird connection to that, but Sam Raimi played this this character that was all, slapstick in it, and it was so funny to see, the director of Evil Dead at the time. I think this is before, he directed Spider and everything. And basically the director of Evil Dead sitting there doing this like slapstick role of like, and in acting. I thought that was pretty funny. So, and I guess there's some kind of Camp Tamaqua connection there.
And Sam Raimi's always been known for putting little Easter eggs and stuff in his movies. So
well, the car, the Ash's car has been in everything.
Yeah, and then the Freddy.
It was actually Sam Raimi's car.
And then the Freddy glove and Evil Dead 2. So any movie he's got something in there.
I think he does Maker's Mark. He puts a Maker's Mark bottle. Now, I later on he did that, like in all the Spider-Mans, it was in there.
Oh, really? Yeah. All right, so Evil Dead 2, 1987. Of course, again, directed by Sam Raimi. Bruce Campbell comes back as Ash. Sarah Berry as Annie Nobe. Dan Hicks as Jake. Cassie Wesley DePaiva as Bobby Joe. Ted Raimi as Possessed Henrietta, which is funny. Denise Bixler as Linda. Richard Domeyer as Ed Getley. John Peaks as Professor Raymond Nobe. And Lou Hancock as Henrietta Nobe. The lone survivor of an onslaught of flesh-possessing spirits holes up in a cabin with a group of strangers while the demons continue their attack. Now, as Brian and I mentioned, we were both confused whether this was a remake or a sequel. This is back in the day before we really had commentaries and stuff. But you could be, I was watching this back knowing that and going, okay, how was I confused? And it's really understandable because, like Brian mentioned before, they did not have the rights to show the clips from the original Evil Dead to recap. So they just refilmed it, but they didn't really refilm it in exactly the same way as the original movie.
They knocked out 3 characters.
Yeah, so you never see like the 3 other characters. It's just Ash and his girlfriend. And even that doesn't play out exactly the same. I mean, the end result is the same where you have like the evil flying through and hitting Ash. That's where the movie actually picks up properly. Yeah. But that whole first sequence is not, especially when I was watching these back to back. Of course, I immediately noticed that there's a lot of differences there. So you could be definitely understand how people could be confused and how I was definitely confused, especially when I watched them out of order. I watched the
and also Bruce Campbell, like in the same sequences essentially that he did in the first one. Now he's Goofy Ash in this one.
Yeah,
like with the hey baby want some champagne? It's like just like things like that.
Yeah,
like
right.
It's like that's not what he was in the first one. So it's funny to it's like you can say it's a sequel all you want. And and I know it truly is, but at the same time, I think definitely it could be considered like a remake sequel at the same time.
It's a little bit of at least the first part, at least the first few minutes is a little bit of a retcon. I mean, you have to say.
Right.
So yeah, I can see that. It is a true sequel in that that's only a very small part of the entire movie.
Right.
That recaps that, but that recap is a bit of a retcon. I can't say that it's a word for word.
Yeah, I'm just surprised that I just don't know why they couldn't do it like in a voiceover or something, or it's like they could have probably done it in a different way that would have made it a little less confusing.
Well, and Linda's not even played by the same actress, so that's another source of confusion.
Yeah, well, yeah, because like one of the things I saw is like a lot of people used to say, "Well, why the hell is Ash so stupid going back to the same cabin again?" It's like I'm like, well, he's not going back; he was already there. He
was trapped. Yeah. So. This one, like I said, I watched this one after Army of Darkness. Absolutely loved it. I've always loved this movie. If you pushed me and asked me, even though I've probably seen Army of Darkness more, Evil Dead 2 is probably going to still be my favorite over Army of Darkness, only because it's a little more straight horror. Now, you Brian, you mentioned that the difference in tone between Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, where Evil Dead 2 definitely has, especially towards the end, when Ash gets his chainsaw arm and everything, he starts getting it really into his character as we know and love him today.
Right.
It definitely starts getting a little bit more into the horror comedy vein. I will say, going back and rewatching it after having watched most recently Ash vs. Evil Dead 2 still struck me as a lot more straight horror than I remembered. Because again, my perception has been colored by the Ash character that I'm seeing in Ash vs. Evil Dead, which is almost like straight comedy. That's like pure horror comedy there. Whereas Evil Dead 2 is still pretty straight for most of the movie. A lot of the comedy comes from just the over the topness, and the craziness of it, but not so much as like actual jokiness. Like he does do his groovy. This is where he first does his groovy line, but he doesn't have a lot of wisecracks in this one. He has a few here and there, but for the most part, it's played pretty straight.
You know what? Like, it's funny. His development is almost like, in a weird way, is almost like Freddy. How, he started off as this really like scary character,
right?
And then like in the second one, he had a couple of lines.
You're right.
Like,
you're right.
And then once it got going, they said, okay, wait, you know what? No, he works best when he has these one-liners and these funny sayings and stuff. And then Ash kind of developed a similar way where he started off as like one thing, and then he developed into this based off of like just some kind of natural Bruce Campbell flow of it. And it's like, and obviously they made the right move because a lot of people, when you talk about horror icons, he's always in the conversation. It's like, especially for and it's rare to have a final guy essentially be so known, because usually you hear about the final girls. You'll hear,
but even the final girls, aside from Laurie Strode, how many final girls have carried on through multiple movies? And
I mean, the only one I think of comes is Cindy Prescott, but that's but most of them don't. That's the thing. Most of them don't. They'll last one or two movies and they swap them out, or I mean, unless you have like a franchise that trying to think of, I mean, maybe, well, they kind of eventually killed her off anyways, Kirsty Cotton, in Hellraiser, but
wouldn't you say even then, I mean, whether that's probably unfortunate, but it was all the time, they still more or less were the victim. I mean, even though they're the final girl and they're fighting back, like Ash.
Oh yeah, no.
I never see Ash as aside from the first movie, I never see him as the victim. Like he becomes like this warrior, this Van Helsing that's the Deadite killer. He's not really he starts out as a final guy, but he turns into like this hero version.
Oh yeah, no, he's like, he's not always being stalked. He sometimes does the stalking.
Right, yeah.
Or he's on the even kill. Oh, yeah, no, definitely. It's just, I was trying to just make the point that's, like, interesting to have, like, that kind of a character where it's, like, think of all the other horror icons are usually the villains,
Yeah, I was really
other than,
struggling.
Like, Laurie Strode, obviously, this isn't one that stands out. And maybe Sidney Prescott, you want to, for argument's sake, you throw her in there of the the quote unquote good guys, that are still as like right up there in name with the and maybe even Dr. Loomis, you want to say, you keep them up there in talk with the iconic villains, so it's rare that they do that, because most of the time the horror franchises are about the villain and everyone else is kind of expendable,
Right,
so
yeah, I was struggling to actually think of like a comparable character arc that I'd seen in another horror franchise, and I really couldn't come up with one, where you've got this, where the central plot or the central character in the movie as it's evolved has not been the villain, even though it's a horror film. And I mean, I guess granted, you could say they turned more comedic as you got an Army of Darkness, but still, when you go through Ash vs. Evil Dead, because I feel like Ash vs. Evil Dead is a definite continuation of, you kind of have to look at that in the same context as the original three movies, and see this Ash character arc. I can't think of another horror franchise. If you guys know one, like, send it to me, where you have like this hero character rise and become the central figure instead of the villain. It's interesting. You kind of have more of a generic villain in the Deadites, which are cool, but it's kind of a nebulous. It's not really a character. It's another, just like we said, it's another unique aspect of these films and how they just kind of broke the mold, and not really been copied. Interestingly, I mean, certain aspects have been copied. Like I said, we've had movies, even in the 80s, we had movies where you had multiple people getting possessed and that kind of thing. But I never really saw this formula copied to any like really degree of success in terms of like an Ash type character. I just can't think of one off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, I like I said, like the closest thing we've mentioned is like I guess Laurie Strode and possibly Sidney Prescott as terms of characters that have, and Laurie Strode is tricky because like you want to, it's never been a consistent timeline.
Yeah,
It's like,
I mean, you could look at the most recent films and go, okay, yeah, she's definitely a badass. But
yeah,
if you just took Halloween 1 and 2 by itself, she's still pretty much just a survivor. She's not. I mean, she's she's a heck of a tough survivor, but she's not on the hunt really. So yeah, yeah. So Evil Dead 2 was completely enjoyed it, watching it again for the podcast. I've like I said, I've seen it many times over the years. It has been a while since I've seen it because I most recently watched the entire run of Ash vs. Evil Dead, which I will save for our next episode to talk about that one. I know, Brian, you haven't seen that one yet.
not all of it. Yeah, I've only seen the first first part of the season's beginning season, but I need to. It's something I was like, I almost bought it too. It was on sale. I was almost bought the whole complete series on Amazon, which I plan to just eventually buy the whole series, just so I have the whole Evil Dead like franchise in there. So I'll probably just buy it at some point and kind of binge it from once I get it. But yeah, the second one, I think what's cool is the second one is it at some level, where it does stay strong as a sequel as it does advance the mythology, and it gives you more over the top, it gives you more characters essentially at some point if you want to like, kind of like if you want to mix the two, what actually happened the first one with the recap of the first one and this one. You add a couple of characters, you add more mythology. I mean, because I guess you could take her parents as, like, even though they're not really seen,
right?
But they're characters, so it's like it basically advances there, and they definitely go more. And this one's always going to be special because you kind of see that creation of the Ash character. He's not full, as full crazy as he is in Army of Darkness and beyond, but you see how it's created, and which is kind of a cool thing, and it's
because the first half of the movie he's largely a lot like, I mean, like you said, he does have like the goofy champagne line or whatever, but he is largely a lot like he was in the first Evil Dead. He's still kind of the scared kind of guy, but he's not really on the hunt. It's only until the second half of the movie where he really becomes Ash, especially after he loses his hand, of course. But so the other thing I liked about when you said, how it just kind of increases what you loved about the first Evil Dead, even with that, slightly bigger budget. Stephen King, thank you. That was another trivia piece there. Stephen King basically convinced Dino De Laurentiis to finance this movie. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have an Evil Dead 2. While DEG, which is De Laurentiis Entertainment Group, was doing Maximum Overdrive, no less. So,
yeah, right.
Which it definitely hits close to home. But yeah, but even though it has that bigger budget, like still a lot of the effects and camera work and everything that Raimi used in the first film are used in this film. So it doesn't lose any of the style from the first movie. You still got that great. I love the stop motion sequence with Linda outside of the cabin. I think it's one of the great stop motion sequences of all time, where she's doing like the ballerina thing and her head staying still while her body's spinning. Love that whole sequence. A lot of the effects and stuff are still very low budget practical things. The one I really loved, it gets me every time, I don't know why, is when Ash is looking in the mirror and then his reflection jumps through the mirror and grabs him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's such a classic scene, and even though I'm looking for it every time, it still surprises me in some fashion. It's just so well done. I love it.
Yeah, and of course everyone remembers, one of the things, and this is one of the few eyeball scenes that I don't mind. Because, like, of course, when the eyeball goes flying out and goes into the girl's mouth.
Oh, I love it.
To me, that's where they kind of, like, really, like, if you didn't know then, I'm like, okay, this is going to be comedic all the way through. Kind of a thing. But,
yeah.
It's just, I like this one just because, they upped it. I still think, like, I mean, I may change when we're done with all of them, but, the only reason I may give the edge to the first one in a potential ranking is because, it was definitely the most truest horror out of the bunch,
Yeah, without a doubt.
the other ones definitely go to horror comedy, so it's like, and they've all, and the funny thing is they all have such great place in the lore. They could all stand alone essentially too.
That's
which
true.
is unique for something that's supposedly a linear progression with their sequels. It manages to be able to stand it. Like Army of Darkness, you could just totally watch, never see the other ones, and still be fine.
Yeah.
Because you get what you want. You get the little recap in the beginning. You get a lovable character to be behind. You get a lot of cool action sequences and gore and comedy and get the whole thing. And I remember seeing that opening night, Army of Darkness, and the theater was like so into it. The crowd was like cheering, and so it was like, it's like that, so that it just shows that like how the what the franchise came from, just like a little 16 millimeter horror film essentially, but it was that strong enough that it could literally, like, think about it. I mean, you watch that movie back then, would you ever see, okay, I see franchise, to the point of where, like, you have like have the character on a lunchbox, it's
yeah,
like,
I
you
know,
don't expect that, that you never thought that was going to be the way it went. But, and it was obviously the right choice, because it's like you still managed to get like a lot of, like, everyone still is happy, I think, too. When they switch, I think sometimes when they switch like a little, what's the word I'm like, the tone of a movie sequel or something, people usually all up in arms, and no pun intended there with Ash, and all that. But like this one, it seems like no matter, they keep doing it, and yet the fans, like all the fans are still in agreement. They still love it. They still move along with it. They don't, there's not as like this divisiveness. It's like, well, no, I like the first one because it's straight horror, and I don't like the second one. No, because you still get what you want in each one, no matter which is the main overall tone, I think. And I think that's important. I think that's obviously a testament to Sam Raimi and, of course, Bruce Campbell.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I think Sam Raimi's just he's got a knack for knowing how to entertain audiences. He's
right.
not a director that, I've never seen him as a director that is so caught up in his artistry that he's so into himself. Like when he creates a movie, he's creating to entertain. Whether those movies are great or just okay. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a Sam Raimi movie that I actively disliked.
I mean, look at Drag Me to Hell, the same way.
Yeah,
totally,
it's a
great
crowd
movie
pleaser
to watch in the theater with a crowd, because they're all. And then I did see it. I don't know if I saw it opening night, but definitely opening week, and I remember it was like the audience was going nuts through that, because it's like, you're right. He does know how to get you. He knows how to hit those repeated, like, crowd pop moments, where it's like the whole audience is going to be into it.
And he's a movie lover, so he comes from a love of film, so he knows how to make films that please audiences, because he's been in the audience cheering along with these movies. So that's what he's doing. So he knew exactly what he needed to do to make things so over the top and make people laugh and make people scream and blood everywhere. I mean, he knew that's what horror fans wanted. And he wasn't so caught up in the artistry part of it that he wasn't going to give them something crowd pleasing. So I just love that about this movie. That's why it's endured and is so popular to this day. And I mean, and again, I keep talking about Ash vs. Evil Dead, and we'll get to it. But that's where he basically goes. That series kind of took fan service to an entirely new level in terms of this franchise, because that's when they just really piled.
There's a new movie coming out, right? Like another one, or is it a show? There's something coming out, right? Another project with Evil Dead.
I know there was an Evil Dead game coming out.
Oh, maybe that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, I remember when the Evil Dead game was announced. I think they've actually released gameplay. I need to go look at it, because I haven't been keeping up with it. I haven't been following it like I should have.
And I think he was in Ash as a character was in one of those fighting games ones too, right? Like Mortal Kombat or something like that.
It wouldn't surprise me, yeah. And then the Ash character's been a ton of comic crossovers. So there's been a lot of the characters in different comic universes and stuff where he's done crossovers and fought different horror villains and stuff. Those are a lot of fun. I've got a couple of those issues.
They need to didn't they need? He needs to go to Pokemon. Isn't there an Ash in there already? It could be the Battle of Ash.
Yeah. I mean, wouldn't you love to see Ash versus Freddy? That'd be a battle of one-liners there. Yeah. I guess we go through some of the trivia of this one. Yeah, Evil Dead 2 classic. I can't wait to talk about Army of Darkness next week, because that's the one I probably watched the most in the shortest period of time because that was like a college favorite, and that one's a lot of fun, of course. But we already mentioned about the Stephen King thing. This film was actually filmed about 2.5 hours from my house, in a little tiny town. I'm trying to think, was it Wadesboro? Is that right? Am I remembering that right?
I just know it was North Carolina.
Yes, Wadesboro. Yes, it's 2.5 hours away. So yeah, not too far from me. And right around the time that Wilmington was, Dino De Laurentiis, his headquarters was like this was his studios. It was DEG Studios down here, and that was like the height of the Wilmington film industry. This is when they were doing Maximum Overdrive. They did that King Kong Lives movie. I mean, and that kind of led into stuff a little bit later on when you started getting into Ninja Turtles and stuff in the late 80s, early 90s. But yeah, that was like the peak where they doing Firestarter, Cat's Eye, all that stuff was around this early 80s time period. Wilmington was just booming for the film industry. That's when the film industry first came here. So it was pretty cool time to be here. Weekend at Bernie's.
Yeah. So this one's kind of interesting, especially for like film fans in general. So it says the sounds of the evil traveling through the forest were a combination of Sam Raimi's voice and audio samples of Orson Welles. So technically making this the last film he appeared in any capacity.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't.
What
know
a trivia question that would make. What was his last film ever that he appeared in any kind of?
That should have been
form?
a triple threat. You could.
No one will ever know. I know. No one will ever know that it would be Evil Dead 2.
Some of these are just, I'm sure a lot of fans already know a lot of these, but the Bruce Campbell completely improvised a scene where he fights his possessed hand in the kitchen of the cabin. That was actually the first take that he did that. I mean, Bruce Campbell, you can't say enough great things about him in this movie. Like he has to carry this entire movie practically on his shoulders.
Oh yeah,
with some of his like solo performances, and that was one of the greats where he's actually fighting his hand. So. I was.
Yeah, my favorite is when he flips himself.
Yeah,
that one's good.
Yeah, that was really good.
But yeah, I mean, the rest of the trivia, I mean, it's probably stuff that everybody knows. It's funny, you would have thought this one would have been a really packed episode, but it's like the thing is like we could spend another half hour talking about like how much we love it and how great it is, but really, it's like it's something that like it's hard to discuss because.
Everybody knows.
Like I think you said earlier, everyone knows it. Everyone's seen this movie. Every horror fan has probably seen Evil Dead.
Yeah, it's like I feel like I'm just telling you. I'm like preaching to the choir here. Like, oh yeah. Oh, Evil Dead's good. Thanks for telling me, Tim. Great. I'll have to go check it out. That I haven't already seen it 50 times. So yeah, apologies to those that haven't seen it, but you're in for a treat. Yeah. I envy you. But yeah, it's kind of one of those things. It's like it's like going to a horror convention and going, hey man, how great is The Thing? Isn't that a great movie? And then
did you see Halloween?
Poltergeist, that clown was scary in Poltergeist, man.
Yeah, it's like the GP.
I don't know. I feel weird talking about it. Like stuff like Poltergeist 2, you could talk about because like you can. It's not one that's like universally beloved, so you can kind of take different angles and stuff on it. But Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 are like universally beloved. There's nothing I can say I can't criticize the movie. I can't.
Yeah, like I don't think I know anyone that doesn't like them.
I don't know anybody that doesn't like Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2. Nobody. I mean, they might say they like one more than the other, but even then, it's like, but I still love both of them.
Yeah, like I like having anyone say, oh, I really don't like these.
Yeah, I don't know. So it's just one of those weird things. Like I said, I honestly don't like doing episodes like this only because what is there to say? Now, next week's episode will be a little different because the remake, I think we can have a little bit more to say about.
Yeah, the remake will be more traditional.
And then the Puppet Master is going to be really fun.
Yeah.
Can't wait for that one.
I don't even remember which ones I've seen.
Yeah, I don't either. And then my voice is actually getting shot because I'm still getting over that mess I had last week. So my voice is quickly fading into oblivion. My dulcet tones are quickly turning to sandpaper, so I guess we should start wrapping this up, Brian. So what was our beer pairing for the first half of The Evil Dead?
So I got one. It's from Ex Novo Brewing Company out of Portland, Oregon, and it's Spirits of the Dead.
There you go.
So I got another one I already have picked for next week. I think it'll be good. But this one is it's 7.3%. It's brewed with German Pilsner and Munich malt, wheat oats, and lactose. hops over 5 pounds per barrel with Citra and Azaka that provide notes of incredibly ripe, juicy stone fruit. That sounds good.
That sounds really good.
Got Citra in it. I'm there already. So, but yeah, overall though, that seems like it's a pretty good beer.
All right, guys. So we'll wrap this up before my voice gives out. And thanks for putting up with our hour of gushing over 2 movies you've probably already a huge fan of. But if you have not seen Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2, drop everything, drop what you're doing, and go seek those out. They are fantastic. They're actually on sale on Vudu this week, or at least they were last week. The double pack that you get.
I feel like we need to call in Mickey Goldman. What are you waiting for?
Yeah. Yeah. So, or if you haven't seen him in a long time, go back and check him out, and just this time take a look at how genius Sam Raimi is, and some of the angles, the camera angles, the way he edits the shots to get across things in a low budget way, the practical effects. Just look at it from like a filmmaker perspective. Man, these movies really, really hold up. It's just I was kind of blown away by them when I watched them 2 back to back for the episodes. So,
yeah, same here.
Yeah, lots of fun. All right, guys, so we'll see you back next week for Army of Darkness and that controversial Evil Dead remake. I remember when it was announced, man, there were some people pissed about that being remade, but it might be surprising what we thought about it. So we'll see you back here next week.
See ya.